Mr. Bison flips!
Mr. Bison flips! Mr. Bison flips! Mr. Bison flips!
Welcome to this exploration of Act 4 of Romeo and Juliet. I'm going to cover the entire act excepting one soliloquy, Juliet's last soliloquy before she drinks it's not her last soliloquy, sorry, but her soliloquy before she drinks the potion from Friar Laurence. Other than that, I'm going to cover the main elements of this act. As with most cases of Shakespeare, Act 4 is really just a plot developer driving the story on from the crises of Act 3 into the ultimate crises of Act 5. So we can cover most of those plot elements, and we'll focus just on some few poetic aspects of this scene, of this act. Just to remind you of the traditional structure of a Shakespearean drama, a Shakespearean drama is always in 5 acts, but in terms of developing the plot, we often call it a rising 3-act narrative. So don't get confused that with the acts of the play. This is more like 3 stages of tension development, if you like. Often when we talk about other stories being developed, we use Freytag's pyramid, where we have the development of tension rising up towards a climax and then a falling arc of the narrative after that. But in the case of Shakespeare, we kind of have 3 points where there's a rising tension in the play, if you like. So if you look at the first point down here, so we kind of have Act 1 building into the first bit of tension, which is, I would claim, kind of at the end of Act 2, when Romeo's gone from, being in love with Rosalind back here to falling in love with his family's worst enemy up here. And then that's kind of resolved a little bit as we realize that Juliet is also open to this love and things can kind of work out for them up until they get married. But then we have a very swift worsening of the situation until the fight scene in Act 3, Scene 1, which is kind of our second crisis. And then we have kind of a toning down of things through Act 3, as again we have the kind of events at Friar Laurence's room, and then the post-wedding scene, etc. But so we're kind of starting Act 4 down at this point here, I would argue, as we're rising up into the crises of Act 5 towards the end of the scene, towards the end of the act. So the central events, the 5 scenes in this act are the following. The first scene is going to take place in Friar Laurence's cell, and we'll hear about Friar Laurence's new plan. So how are we going to overcome this new issue with Juliet? Remember, she's having to deal with Paris's proposal and her parents forcing her to get married on Thursday. So she's gone to Friar Laurence for some advice on that. And then we'll return home, and Juliet is going to apologize and say, sorry, Dad, I guess I will have to marry Paris after all because of the plan that Friar Laurence has come up with. And then Scene 3 is Juliet actually drinking the potion that's going to put her to sleep for 42 hours. And then the last 2 scenes are really just plot development, where the Capulet family is preparing for the wedding party on what turns out to be the Wednesday morning after all. But that quickly ends and becomes the preparation for a funeral, as Juliet is found dead in the morning of her wedding day. So that is, in broad sweeps, the plot of Act 4. So the first scene of Act 4 is taking place at Friar Laurence's cell, where Juliet is meeting Paris accidentally, not intentionally. They're both there for different reasons. Paris is there to ask Friar Laurence to marry them on Thursday, and Juliet is there, obviously, to have a solution from Friar Laurence. And Paris insists that Juliet says how much she loves him, but of course they've barely ever spoken. So she does not say that, for obvious reasons, because she loves Romeo and she does not want to marry Paris at all. And as soon as Paris departs, Friar Laurence kind of comes up with his new plan for how he can save Juliet from her troubles. So Friar Laurence is obviously in a bit of a pickle here, because he has married Romeo and Juliet. He knows why Paris cannot possibly marry Juliet. So he's trying to find ways to dissuade Paris. So in this case, when Paris has said, yeah, I want to get married, and she doesn't know about it yet, Friar Laurence tries to use that as his excuse. So you say you do not know the lady's mind. I like it not. I don't think you should get married yet, if you haven't yet asked her. But Paris says, no, it's because she's immoderately weeping for Tybalt's death. Her father really wants to speed this along. In fact, he thinks it's dangerous for her that she's giving her sorrow that much sway. So he's hastening our marriage to stop the inundation of her tears, to stop her from crying as much as she is. So he's kind of selflessly volunteering to marry so that Juliet will feel better, is his argument. And then Juliet attempts a bit more of her puns, the way she was deflecting her mother in the previous scene. In this case, Paris is saying, happily met my lady and my wife. And she replies, that may be when I may be a wife. Which, of course, she may not currently be because she's already married to Romeo, and therefore she can't legally become a bigamist and marry a second husband, and therefore she may not be. But Paris is trying to say that, well, that maybe must be love on Thursday next. But she's kind of refusing to take that in. She's not obviously going to marry him on Thursday. And then Juliet continues to try to refuse to speak to him really at all. He asks, come you to make confession of this father? And she says, well, if I answer that, I should confess to you. And Paris tries to, well, at least don't deny to him that you love me. But she will confess to you, to Paris, that I love him, Friar Laurence. That's as far as Juliet will go. So she's really reluctant here to really engage with Paris in any kind of communication, really. So we'll skip ahead a few lines. So after Paris finally departs, he forces a kiss upon Juliet before he departs. And then Friar Laurence quickly says, I already know your grief. I know what you come here to talk about. It strange me past the compass of my wits. So he's really struggling and grappling with this idea. He really doesn't really know what to do at this point either. But Juliet does not want to hear that. She says, if in your wisdom you can't give any help, then I will help myself with this knife presently. So she is determined to, if nothing else, kill herself rather than marry Paris. And we can see her strong resolve in the words that follow as well. She says that God joined my heart and Romeo's, and thou, Friar Laurence, joined our hands. So before this hand, which you've sealed Romeo's, shall be labelled with another deed to marry someone else, this, the knife, shall slay them both. And be quick, because I long to die if thou speak that's not of remedy. So if you talk of something else, then I am ready to die. And this kind of resolve shocks Friar Laurence quite a bit. He's not expecting this from Juliet. He thought she was maybe more meek than this. So when she is this resolved, he does actually have a backup plan for her. So he says, hold on, daughter. I do spy a kind of hope which craves as desperate an execution as death. If thou hast the strength of will to slay thyself, then it is likely you will undertake a thing like death to chide away this shame. So if you want to try something that's similar to dying, then we can give that a go. If you've got the courage to kill yourself, then you probably have the courage to do what I'm going to propose. So hold on then. Go home tonight, be happy, give consent to marry Paris. When's this tomorrow? So tomorrow night, make sure you lie alone in your chamber, not the nurse lie with thee in thy chamber. And then he holds out the vial to her. Take thou this vial, and once you're in bed, drink this liquor, which presently will go through your veins, and through your veins will run a cold and drowsy humor, so you're going to feel like you're numbing out. And no pulse shall keep this native progress in your body, but surcease. So it's going to end completely. All signs of life will end. You will have no warmth, no breath shall testify thou livest. The roses in thy lips and cheeks shall fade to paly ashes, and thy eyes' windows fall like death when he shuts up the day of life. Each part deprived of supple government shall stiff and stark and cold appear like death, and in this borrowed likeness of shrunk death thou shalt continue 42 hours. So we see quite a lot of imagery in this passage here, describing her in her in her dormant state, if you like, in her perceived death. The roses in her lips. So again, we got this floral imagery that we've seen in other places, the motif that we've seen of flowers. In this case, the flowers representing life, right? It's the color of the blood in her lips that's going to be gone. So the rosy hue of her lips is going to disappear. The cheeks, she'll also lose that pink color of the roses. And then we've seen the motif of fire throughout, and here that's continued, but in paly ashes, so in a dead fire. Her eyes' windows will fall like death when he shuts up the day of life. So we picture a personified death in this simile that comes to shut the windows of someone's life. And each body part is going to become stiff and stark and cold. So all those adjectives kind of driving that image of the dead body, and she will appear like death for an extended period of 2 and 40 hours, so 42 hours, almost 2 full days of this dead-like state. So in the morning when your bridegroom comes to get you, you will be lying there dead, and as is the custom in our country, so this is obviously now Shakespeare stepping in as an Englishman, explaining the customs of Italy, where this takes place, in Verona, that in your best robes you will be uncovered on the bier and carried off to the Capulet family vault, where you will lie next to generations of dead Capulets. But don't worry about that, because when you wake up, that very night shall Romeo bear thee hence to Mantua. So I'll make sure he gets there and he'll carry you away. So if you feel you're strong enough and you're not going to be inconstant and not carry this through, and you're not going to fall victim of womanish fear, then you will be absolutely fine with this plan. And we see no hesitation whatsoever in Juliet, who says, give me, oh tell me not of fear. And he hands over the vial, of course, and she goes off, and he sends the friar with speed to Mantua with my letters to thy lord. Now we know what's going to happen to Friar John on the way. But as far as we know, everything is fine for Juliet. She goes home with this vial to now apologize to her parents. And they're the only quotes I'm going to cover in this act, because the rest really is just plot development. Juliet comes home, she says sorry to her father, apologizes, and is forgiven, and sent to her bedroom to and sleep alone, because obviously she doesn't want to sleep with the nurse tonight. Sends the nurse off to work, help her mother out. And then scene 3, we'll cover in a different video, is her drinking the potion. And then the next morning, her being found dead by the family. So that is broadly all of Act 4. I know it's a rushed version of it, but it does cover the most central parts, apart from that one soliloquy. So should you have any questions, please leave a comment below, or see me in class, of course. Otherwise, we'll see you back soon for that soliloquy and then Act 5.